So, today we're diving into one of the most consequential stories of the 20th century. It's all about how a political idea, Zionism, an idea born out of centuries of Jewish persecution, actually became the State of Israel in just 50 years. It's a really incredible story of vision, brutal conflict, and one world-changing vote. And really, our whole story kicks off with this question. You see, for centuries, this idea of a Jewish homeland, it was more of a religious dream, right? An aspiration. But then, in the late 19th century, with anti-Semitism boiling over in Europe, something shifted. That dream turned into an urgent political movement. And this is the guy who really lit the fuse, Theodor Herzl. He was a journalist, and what he saw happening around him completely shocked him. So in 1896, he published this pamphlet that laid out a clear political plan for a Jewish state. But let's be clear, this idea was radical, and it was absolutely not a guaranteed success. Okay, so Herzl's vision was powerful, no doubt about it, but making it real, that was a whole other ballgame. He was up against a mountain of obstacles, and not just from the big world powers of the day, but, and this is surprising, from inside the Jewish community itself. You know what's really fascinating here is just how unpopular Zionism was in the beginning. A lot of European Jews actually saw it as a threat to their efforts to assimilate, to fit in. The wealthy patrons he needed, they weren't funding it. The Ottoman Sultan, who actually controlled Palestine, he gave him a flat no. I mean, it really looked like Herzl's dream was dead on arrival. And sadly, Herzl died in 1904, his dream still just a dream. But then, just a decade later, World War I. The entire map is redrawn, the Ottoman Empire collapses, and suddenly, there's an opening, the exact kind of political chaos that Zionism needed. And stepping right into this opening is a totally new kind of leader, Chaim Weizmann. Now, Weizmann was a brilliant chemist, and he solved this huge problem for the British war effort, basically how to mass-produce acetone for explosives. So when they asked him how they could repay him, he said something amazing. He said, "There's nothing I want for myself, but I would like you to do something for my people." Now, did that get him a state right then and there? No, but it got him something almost as good. Access, a seat at the table. And that access was absolutely crucial, because Britain was making a lot of promises during the war. To the Zionists, they're offering a national home. To the Arabs, they're hinting at an Arab kingdom if they'll revolt against the Ottomans. And then secretly, just between themselves, Britain and France drew up this thing called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, basically carving up the Middle East for themselves. Yeah, all of these promises were on a massive collision course. And this right here, this is the whole conflict, boiled down into a single complicated sentence. The Balfour Declaration was a huge win for the Zionists, but look at that carefully worded little phrase, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities. What does that even mean in practice? It was basically a promise to two different peoples with competing claims to the very same piece of land. So after the war, Britain gets control of Palestine. It's under something called a mandate, which was this system where the winners of the war would, guide these former Ottoman lands towards self-rule, supposedly. And it's right here, on the ground, that this whole abstract conflict of promises and vague wording becomes dangerously, violently real. Just look at this timeline. It really shows you how things escalated, and fast. For about 30 years, from the 1880s on, nationalist violence was actually pretty minimal. We're talking about 13 deaths in 3 decades. But then you jump to 1929. Riots break out over a holy site in Jerusalem. Over 100 people are killed, and by the late 30s, it's a full-blown Arab revolt against both the British and the Zionists. Thousands are killed, wounded, or exiled. The change is just staggering. And when you look at this, you can really see why. The Jewish and Arab communities had totally opposite game plans. The Zionists, for the most part, worked with the British. Weizmann had this strategy he called the camel in the tent. Get the nose in first, and then gradually, bit by bit, the whole camel gets inside. It was all about slowly building a presence through immigration and buying land. The Arabs, on the other hand, saw exactly what was happening and adopted a policy of total non-cooperation. This saw the whole British mandate as an illegitimate scheme designed to steal their homeland. So, as things are getting more and more violent on the ground, a huge debate starts raging inside the Zionist movement. Was Weizmann's diplomacy the right path, or did they need something tougher? Okay, so to really get this internal debate, it helps to think about it with this political framework. On one side, you have universalism. That's the idea that your nation is part of a bigger family of nations. It's all about cooperation, mutual respect. And on the other side, you have particularism. This one is all about looking inward, focusing on the unique needs and survival of your own nation, putting its interests first. And this split, it's going to define everything for the Zionist movement. Herzl, the founder, he was a universalist. He really did imagine a state where Jews and Arabs could live together like brothers. But now, a new, much more hardline voice emerges, Vladimir Jabotinsky. He was a particularist through and through. He basically said, look, Arab resistance isn't going away. It's inevitable. Diplomacy is a waste of time. He argued the only way forward was to build what he called an iron wall, a Jewish military so strong that the Arabs would have no choice but to give up and accept them.
So you've got this intense debate happening, diplomacy versus force, all while the world is careening toward another absolute catastrophe. World War II was about to change everything, and it would push the Zionist movement in a much, much more decisive direction.
The Holocaust, the sheer unimaginable horror of it, was what one historian called the ultimate vindication of Zionism. Suddenly, the quest for a Jewish state wasn't just a political goal anymore. It became a moral imperative, a practical necessity. The argument that Jews needed a safe haven, a place to ensure their own survival. How could the world ignore that now? Especially when you had hundreds of thousands of Jewish refugees, survivors, stuck in camps all over Europe. So after the war, Britain is completely exhausted. They can't control the violence in Palestine, which is just getting worse, especially from Jewish militant groups who were very much inspired by Jabotinsky's Iron Wall idea. So they basically wash their hands of the whole mess and toss it to the brand new United Nations. The UN sends a commission to figure out what to do, and they come back with a truly dramatic recommendation. Just end the British mandate. Partition Palestine into 2 states, one for Arabs, one for Jews. Now, the idea of partition wasn't totally new, but this was different. This was happening on the floor of the United Nations. The fate of the entire region was about to come down to one single nail-biting vote. Okay, so for this partition plan to pass, it needed a 2/3 majority. And the lobbying from both sides was just off the charts intense. President Truman actually said he felt more pressure on this one issue than on anything else. Ever. And even with the US and the Soviet Union, think about that, the 2 new superpowers, on board, the vote was so tight that pretty much everyone expected it to fail. But then it happened. November 29th, 1947. The vote is held. And in an absolutely stunning result, the resolution passes. Just barely, but it passes. The Zionist movement now had what it had dreamed of for 50 years, international legal backing for a state. In Tel Aviv, people are celebrating in the streets. David Ben-Gurion, who would become the first prime minister, shouts from a balcony, "We are a free people." Can you imagine? After 50 years of struggle, this was a moment of pure, absolute triumph. But at the UN, the Arab delegates literally walked out of the assembly, declaring the vote completely invalid. The fallout was immediate, and it was violent. A civil war breaks out almost instantly. And then, just 6 months later, as the last British troops are pulling out, David Ben-Gurion stands up and formally declares the establishment of the State of Israel. And the very next day, armies from 5 neighboring Arab countries invade. So the 50-year quest, it worked. It had succeeded. Herzl's idea, his vision from that little pamphlet, was now a real country, born from a UN vote and immediately forged in the fires of war. But, and this is the crucial part, the creation of Israel also meant the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, which created a whole new refugee crisis. So as one nation's dream finally came true, it set the stage for a conflict that is still very much with us today. And it leaves us with one last incredibly heavy question. What would be the cost?